Hello, I'm KD Hale, Vice President of the Association of African American Cultural Gardens, and I have the honor of welcoming you, our audience, to our Sankofa Web Series. Our goal is to educate regarding the African American experience through this series. We will be interviewing some of the most interesting, engaging leaders, business leaders, and great entrepreneurs in this great city. These change agents will tell us about their journey, who they are, who inspired them, what they do, and what does African American history and African American cultural gardens mean to them. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page, the Association of African American Cultural Gardens. And go to our website, AAACG.org, for most updated information regarding events in our Sankofa series, which can also be viewed on demand. We will be breaking ground for the final phase of building the African American Garden this year, and we are excited. But in the meantime, please enjoy this episode of the Sankofa series brought to you by the Association of African American Cultural Gardens. Thank you.
Hi, I am Val B. King, granddaughter of legendary King of the Blues, B.B. King. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
This is Rachel Hill with the African American Cultural Gardens Sankofa Web Series. And I'm here today with Danielle Sydnor, president of the NAACP in Cleveland, Ohio. And Danielle, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here and to be a part of the series.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to have you. Well, why don't you first start off by telling our audience a little bit about yourself?
So I am the current president of the Cleveland branch of the NAACP. I always mention that I'm originally from California, so I'm a lover of the sunshine at heart. But I came to Cleveland when I was in middle school, and so I planted my roots here and take care of my sons. One is in college and one is on his way to college, and just really excited about having the chance to participate in giving back to the community through service in the NAACP and other organizations.
So what made you want to be involved with the NAACP?
So initially, I became active in the local branch as a result of a leader in the business community that I was working with when I was at Merrill Lynch. I literally got an email saying, send me your birthday and address, I'm buying you a membership and come to this meeting. I was very familiar with the organization. My grandmother had been president of the Sacramento branch of the NAACP at one point in time. My great aunt is still actually on the national board and was the president of the California-Hawaii NAACP. But the Cleveland branch honestly didn't really speak to me and the things that I was engaged in at the time. And having some middle-aged leaders that were saying we're also trying to identify younger leaders to get involved was really what compelled me to come to a meeting and then recognize that I couldn't criticize an organization if I wasn't willing to kind of pull up my sleeves and put my shoulders to the plow and get to work alongside people.
And what have been some of the notable accomplishments of the NAACP since you've taken over?
So really, the intergenerational, I think, design of our leadership team to me is something that I'm extremely proud of. it's often a challenge to think about how you bring together folks not only from different backgrounds, socioeconomic statuses, but also leadership styles and age demographics. We get this in our community of, that's how y'all used to do it, and this is how we do it now. And really, I have tried to find the value in recognizing that some of our elders have been around for a long time. They have more stories that they'll forget than we've ever heard. And so how do we bring that to the forefront, recognize the road that they paved for us, but then also marry that with our way of doing things, technology, the ease and access that we might have with using some services that maybe they don't. And so it's really a 21st century style of civil rights activism and civic engagement.
What would you say, I know there's a lot of challenges we face, but what would you say the top 3 challenges are that we're facing right now that the NAACP is tackling?
One of the biggest challenges is representation, so gerrymandering, understanding that anything that we want accomplished at the state level, which is where most politics happens, is at the local level. There is a lot of effort right now in the state of Ohio and also across the country, really, around legislation and maps that would not give us fair and equal representation in the state house and even at the congressional level. So trying to help our community better understand why that's so important. When people are trying to navigate everything else, you have the effects of the pandemic that is still ravaging our community. You have the economic fallout of the pandemic and inflation and all of the things that are happening today. So how do you pull somebody into a conversation and say, I want you to care about a legislative map? And so thinking about how we do civic engagement is also, I think, a challenge, because you have social media and you have other platforms where people are getting information that's not always accurate, but it's being fed to them at such a rapid pace and speed that we have to try and combat that with the truth. And the final thing, I would really say is just economic inequality. It is always something that I think foundationally drives a lot of the other issues that we see in our community. A lot of the efforts that we see spend time focused on what I would call symptoms. If you look at violence, if you look at health outcomes, at the root, it is the lack of economic self-sufficiency that people don't have that causes a lot of the problematic symptoms in our society.
Now you have your own company too. Can you talk about your own company?
Yeah, so I do consulting work as well. I have a business called We Win Strategies Group, and that really was birthed before I knew there was going to be this thing called the pandemic. But during the pandemic, I left my previous full-time employment and actually started consulting full-time because my background is in finance, and I had spent some time working with high net worth individuals as a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch during the last recession. And one of the things that I recognized is that a lot of times recovery efforts are not equal. And so people who know how to navigate systems, people who have access to people inside of systems tend to fare better. And in our community, we're often denied those opportunities. And so I started consulting during the pandemic to assist Cuyahoga County and some of our local nonprofit organizations ensure that the dollars that were being distributed from the CARES Act were done so in an equitable way, and we could make sure that small, Black, and other ethnic minority-owned businesses got equal access to those resources.
And how are the results of those programs? Are they still pending and ongoing?
So the initial recovery efforts were, I would say, like a shot in the arm, right? It was kind of to stop the bleeding, to get people some immediate access to capital. And we distributed over $8.7 million through Cuyahoga County to businesses, and over 50% of those went to self-identified minorities. So we didn't make people fill out, their birth certificate and all that stuff. We tried to make it very simple and easy for people to get access to resources. So that was very successful. However, we know that in a lot of industries, that was really just enough to get people by for a little bit of time. And then there were other federal programs that came along after that. So the American Rescue Plan that is still providing dollars to individuals today, this new infrastructure bill, and whatever will come down in the future. So I think we're seeing new iterations of recovery efforts that are at play now, and a lot of businesses that are still open are open because they were able to take advantage of those resources.
And just to clarify for our audience, was this the PPP loans?
No, so this was not PPP.
Okay,
PPP
so
was a totally
program?
separate, yeah. This was, so initially during the pandemic with the CARES Act, it provided cash directly to municipalities. And so the municipalities had opportunity to design their own programs. And so many of them did do forgivable loans, or they did grants to businesses. And PPP were separate products that you got directly through the federal government, but generally through a banking entity of some sort. So these were totally separate programs.
Now, one of your quotes that I liked after I had a chance to read about you a little bit is, "You can't program your way out of poverty." Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, so now I'm actually accepted a full-time role in Columbus, and so I'm in this
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm in this transition period because my youngest son graduates high school later this year, and so until he does that, I'm in Cleveland part-time and in Columbus part-time. But the role that I've just recently accepted is focused on looking at large-scale systemic interventions for poverty. And so what the statement and the quote really comes from the fact that there are a lot of great programs that happen today to try and provide services and support to individuals who are experiencing poverty. But what we know is a program generally has finite resources. It's only able to accommodate a certain number of people. And so every time we implement a new program thinking it's going to eradicate a root cause issue, generally it doesn't. And so when I think about how we need to tackle this, we have to have systems level thinking. And the example that I would give is the Affordable Care Act. A lot of people say, well, why was that impactful? We know it didn't necessarily create a new health insurance company. It didn't create hospitals. But what it did was identify roadblocks that many people had with access to quality health care, and it removed those roadblocks. So now, if you have a pre-existing condition, you're mandated to still have access to health care. You know, certain preventative measures that were not necessarily required to be covered under a healthcare policy before, now they are. And so it's helping to reduce the number of people that have to go to emergency rooms or have to have unreimbursed care. And that is like a systemic change that we have to be thinking about. The same would be like Medicare. The number of seniors that used to be in poverty, we still have issues today, but it was much worse when we didn't have Medicare and Social Security, right? And so now we have these programs that cover so many more people. And so the type of interventions that I'm thinking about for poverty are along those same kind of lines.
What inspires you and drives you?
People. I really deeply care about people. It's probably the only thing that I care about. And I say that because it doesn't matter what the title is, it doesn't matter what the organization I'm working at, it doesn't matter what my focus is. What keeps me going is if I feel like I'm having an impact on people. It can be the people that I manage and lead. It can be the people in my community. I care deeply about seeing people become better than what they were as a result of engaging with me.
And what does Black history and culture mean to you?
Black history to me means a recognition for all that we have experienced, all that we have contributed, and the totality of our story. And it means to me the ability to take a step back and understand where we come from, so that way we can have the, I think, the ability to recognize where we can go. Because if you don't know your history and you don't know your story, you can deny yourself the ability to do things that your ancestors did with ease just because you didn't know that you were capable of that. And especially in our society today that unfortunately is still hyper segregated in many places, where we still don't always see adequate representation, it's really easy to believe that there are only some places where we're supposed to be. There's only some places where we deserve to have access. But when you go back and look at history and recognize the people that sat in at lunch counters to make it possible for us to walk into restaurants and have equal service, then you can appreciate going into an establishment, I think, in a different way. When you think about the individuals who help to patent things that we use today that make our life easier, then that means that we have a space in entrepreneurship, we have a space in innovation, and we need to be reminded of that often. And I think ultimately culture, in my opinion, we drive culture. We drive culture in music, we drive culture in art, and we've always had a significant influence, not just in America, but I really believe around the world.
And what are your thoughts about the battles of the legislation that's passing all over the country regarding the teaching of Black history and culture?
I believe that anytime you see substantial progress in the Black community, there's always a very swift reaction from bigots and racist individuals that are trying to find a way to minimize our contributions and our significance. And so if you go back, and this is why, again, I think history is so important, this is just a new effort of the same kind. It's just showing up in a different way. And so today the conversation is about critical race theory, which nobody really actually teaches in school.
Absolutely.
But now, you know, the language is morphing into topics that are divisive, and we are on, I think, a very slippery slope. And the conversation that I have with a lot of people is, this is the time when people that say they are our allies need to step up, because today it's a conversation about Black people, tomorrow it's a conversation about Jewish people, the next day it's a conversation about Japanese, because if you look at our history, in all of these different spaces, there have been decisive things that have happened to these different populations. So how do we band together and recognize, if we don't stand for each other, folks will try and divide and conquer and find ways to minimize the contributions that all of us have had to society.
And what does the garden mean to you, the African American Cultural Garden? What does that mean to you?
The word that comes to mind for me is permanency. How do we have a place that is ours, that we can always come back to, that we can have as a marker of significance? And I think the garden is that thing. You have the opportunity to drive through the cultural gardens and see the way that many cultures decided to express themselves. I remember the unveiling of the design of the garden and the intentionality of trying to think about how we identify what it means to be American, but also African American, and the fact that our experiences as Black people of the diaspora are varied. And so how do we build something that can really contribute to recognizing all of the various experiences that we have? And I think the team has done a phenomenal job in being able to bring forth a design that we can all be proud of, but then also to try and work on continuing to elevate and share with people what the garden is, so that we know it belongs to us, and we've got to go and we've got to participate and we got to see it, and we have to keep spreading the word about it.
And how do you feel that the garden can help the youth? There's so many, at times youth are being neglected with everything about what they need to know, but how do you think that the garden can affect generations to come?
I think exposure is a very important thing, and so the garden has the opportunity to expose young people, I think, to something new. And also, again, kind of setting the example and expectation of what we can do for ourselves. You have a Black architect that put together the design. You have Black people that have advocated for taking care of the garden before there was, you know, a fixture on the land. And so I think being able to share that history and that pride of, this belongs to us, this represents us, we must protect it, and it's a point of pride.
And hopefully that's something that won't be able to be erased.
It better not be erased.
Now, can you also tell me, so you said you're a Cali girl, so you came to Cleveland when you were in middle school. So right now you're transitioning between Cleveland and Columbus. What will you miss the most about Cleveland? I know you're still going to be back and forth, but what are some of the things that you're going to miss the most about Cleveland?
Well, I think Cleveland is a very gritty town. Sacramento is a place that I think is actually very similar to Columbus, in that you have state capitals. People come there to do transactions and deals. You have your legislature there. So you have a lot of people that are transit and kind of in and out. When I came to Cleveland, it was one of the first times that I met generations of people that were from the same place. In Sacramento, almost nobody is from Sacramento. Your parents, so the 50s and 60s, you saw this great migration of people to California, especially Black people. And so you don't have as many of, like, my grandmother or my great-grandmother is from this particular city. And so to come to Cleveland and recognize how deep-rooted people are in the community is something that is special. I think the people of Cleveland are the thing I'll miss the most.
Now, will the organization you're going to be working with, will that tackle all across the country, or will it be a Columbus-based thing or Ohio-based thing?
Yeah, so my efforts will be primarily focused on Franklin County.
Okay.
But the design of the work is that we should be trying to build a model that other communities that are struggling with the same issues can replicate. And so I am hopeful that if we're successful, there are some of the strategies that we will implement that can be replicated in places like Cuyahoga County and other counties across the country.
Absolutely. So I think it's wonderful. Thank you for all the work that you do, all the work that you're going to continue to do, and I think it's amazing. I think you're going to like Columbus. I went to Ohio State, so I lived there for 4 years. So it's a little different from Cleveland.
It's a little different.
Yeah, very different. But I think you're going to enjoy there, and just want to thank you so much, and thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And this is Rachel Hill for the African American Cultural Gardens Sankofa Web Series.
Hello, I'm Beverly Lloyd, board member and Juneteenth chair for the Association of African American Cultural Gardens. And we are bringing you Do You Know? We like to highlight leaders in the community, both in person and virtually. So let's take off right now with a wonderful individual and see if you do know. This individual is an American television producer, screenwriter, and author. She is best known as the showrunner, creator, head writer, and executive producer of the television medical drama Grey's Anatomy, and the political thriller series Scandal, and the popular thriller series How to Get Away with Murder. She revealed the axiom that guides her wherever she sets out to write anything: stay away from cliches. She also says, when you're not making the most of your life, then whatever your life is, it's not a life. If you guessed Shonda Lynn Rhimes, then you do know.
Hi, my name is Levita Ewing, board member for the Association of African American Cultural Gardens. The mission of the association is to educate regarding the African American experience and to complete the monument for the African American Garden. Our Sankofa series represents our dedication to bring to you the history and amazing journey of African Americans in this great city. Our garden represents a journey, starting with the door of no return to the resilience of our ancestors and family to make a difference in this country. The water feature gives us hope and joy for our future generations, knowing you can accomplish anything with dedication and hard work, regardless of the migrants of challenges. Our goal is to break ground this year to complete the garden, but we need your help to get to the finish line. Please make your tax-deductible donation by going to AAACG.org or mail your check to P.O. Box 20237, Cleveland, Ohio, 44120. Thank you.